The next step into setting up your scene is what a lot of animators that are, experienced and going for speed and quality. Basically, if you're in a production environment, you want to be setting up your hotkey menu. And this isn't set in stone, but it is one of the better practices to get into a good workflow. And every animator has different hotkeys that they want to set up, and you may want to experiment with some hotkeys that you've seen other animators work with. Basically, this is going to be how you set this up before you get started in your scene. You can hit the space bar and go to Windows, Setting Preferences, and then you're going to have a hotkey editor. Now in here, your default is going to be set to Maya default, and by the Maya default, it says it has a locked icon. You're not going to be able to manipulate this at all. It's basically locked, and this is the default Maya. From there, if you hit duplicate, it will basically make a duplicate of the Maya default scene, and then you can rename it from there. I already have one set here, and this is going to be basically how I would be animating, and I'm going to show you a few of the items that I have that are set. So if you go into the menu items here, this is going to show you all the commands that are in the Maya scene. And basically for us, we're going to be interested in the animation and the playback options. And for me, I like to toggle my playback with X, and basically what that's going to do is that if you were to have an animation in the scene and you hit play, it's going to basically play what's in the timeline here, so you can see it moving. And what I've done is I've mapped this playback toggle to X, and the reason being I have it for X is if I have my left hand, I'm right-handed, so my left hand will never really need to move on the right side of the keyboard. It's always staying on the left side of the keyboard, and that basically just helps, basically allow me to not have to keep moving my hand all over the keyboard every single time, which if added up over thousands of movements takes more time. The next, I also mapped a X to stop it as well, so you can have the same letter to do two functions. You can also do an alt combination and a control option as well if that's something that you want to set up. Another one that I have that I use a lot is the next key and previous key, and I've mapped it the same way. I've mapped C and V to the next and previous key, and what basically that's going to allow you to do is it's going to be allowing you to go from one extreme pose to the next pose. So the next key would be V. So let's say, for example, if I had a key at frame 0 and a key at frame 15, and then there's nothing keyed from 1 to 14, when I hit the C key, it'll snap right to frame 15, and if I hit the previous key, it'll snap back to 0. So if I alternate between C and V, it's kind of like if I was in a 2D animation flipping key poses, I'd be hitting C and V back and forth, and that kind of just allows you to see what your keyframe poses are, and it's very common for animators to be tracking arcs and stepping through their keys. So if you ever hear the term stepping through your keys, that's what they're referring to by using the C and V keys in this situation, by going from the previous and the next frame. So that's just a quick overview of some of the hotkeys that you can set up. One other shortcut that I have is deselect, and it's kind of the same thing, because when I have a character in the scene and I've selected a controller and I'm really close into my work and I don't want to have to keep clicking off the character on and off to basically deselect the character or select something else, I just have the cue mapped, so it's still on that left side of the keyboard, and it deselects whatever is selected, whether that be a prop or the characters, one of the character controllers or something like that. So you can kind of get an idea for all the commands that you can set here, and then you can save it and it will remember your settings. So that's kind of a quick overview of how these commands work and how you can start customizing them. In terms of how this timeline works, I think it's a little bit easier for you to be able to see how these numbers and everything go into play in best practices when we start animating the character. And I'll start referring to how to set some of these numbers and time sliders up, and how to create movies and play blasts and things like that. So these are basically just the settings that you want to set up, and right before you start bringing in your character and you start animation.